I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners." John's disciples and Pharisees were fasting, and they came and said to him, "Why do John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" And Jesus said to them, "While the bridegroom is with them, the attendants of the bridegroom cannot fast, can they? So long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. But the days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and they will fast in that day. No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, otherwise the patch pulls away from it, and the new from the old, and a worse tear results. No one puts new wine in old wineskins, otherwise the wine will burst, the skin and the wine is lost, and the skins as well. But one puts new wine in fresh wineskins." Thank you. Yeah. I do. All right. I think we're all, or most of us, are going to be pretty familiar with this story. So I wanted to start with unpacking a few things. So we talk about this phrase that you hear here when Jesus comes to call Levi and Matthew, the same person, the sinners and the tax collectors. He's a tax collector, and they seem to have their own special category of nastiness with which they are regarded in society. And why is that? Well, it's for a couple of major reasons that Jews would see tax collectors as this special class of undesirable people. One is that they were Jewish, and yet they were turncoats. They were working for the occupying force, the Romans, right? They're Jewish people who are collecting taxes for this oppressive power that has come in to rule over the original government of the Jewish people. Okay, so we have Jews that have said, you know what? The best way for me to make my living and to live my life is to help the Romans oppress my people. I would probably be in the same camp. I would go, man, that's a really crappy way to make a living. That's a really cruddy way to go about your life. And furthermore, these people were cheats because the way that tax collectors were chosen in those days would be they would bid on the job. So they would say, I'm willing to pay this much money in order to receive the job of tax collector in this area or this place. And so the job would go to the highest bidder. And so then in order for the tax collector to make money himself, he would have to actually collect more taxes than Rome was collecting. And so these people are not just working for this oppressive government, but they are lining their own pockets with the taxes of their own people over and above what Rome is taxing them. So we understand that, this would be upsetting for people to know who you are, and we can understand a little bit why people would regard these people as disliked people or people they would not like to associate with. And so then, again, when preaching on this passage, we often hear that this is kind of strange, right? That Matthew would just kind of up and leave everything and say, how weird. A guy comes walking along and says, hey, come and follow me. Leave your job, which, as we just outlined, probably isn't as great as we thought it was. Way to make a living, but some definite downsides. But just leave and follow me. Well, there's a couple of different things, or a couple important things to note here as well. And that is that Jesus had other disciples at this time, it's clear from the passage, and he'd been around teaching. And so we don't know exactly if Levi knew Jesus, Matthew knew Jesus, but we're pretty certain that he knew of him. So it wasn't like you just met this guy 10 seconds ago and you don't know who he is and you don't know what he's about. He's been out there teaching and preaching and has a little bit of a following. And so Matthew would know who he is and was probably, based on his response, pretty interested in what he was teaching. So I think the most radical part of this passage actually is not Matthew's response, but it's the fact that Jesus would call this individual. Right? Jesus is building a ministry. He wants to reach people, and he is going to choose the most undesired person he can find in society to say, hey, come be in my inner circle. Come be one of my closest students. Come walk with me, talk with me every day, glean everything I have from you. And then when we go around and teach and preach, you're going to be right there with me. That's just not how we would do it. I don't know about you, but if I was building a company or a ministry, I don't think I would start a list of people that I want to be running this ministry with me with the lowest class people I could find, at least in terms of reputation and what they're going to bring to the table as far as networking and things like that. But that is exactly what Jesus does. And this passage is going to flesh out a little bit more of why that's so beautiful for you and me today. Because the passage continues, right? So it's not just that Jesus calls Matthew and says, hey, come and follow me. What do you do when you call somebody or bring somebody close or start to develop a relationship with them? Well, your circle and their circles overlap. Right? And so this is exactly what happens. And Jesus goes and is eating a meal with Matthew and his friends and other tax collectors. And the Pharisees and the scribes, they see this and they're upset. And we are really, really harsh on the Pharisees usually when we talk through passages, or again, read the Bible, right? As these just hard-hearted, terrible people who had grace right in front of them and didn't comprehend. But if we try to be as charitable as we can to understanding their point of view, I think that's something that it's important to do as humans, even as we look back, through the scriptures. You can understand that these Pharisees, while these tax collectors were, cheating and oppressing to make their living, these Pharisees and scribes were studying the scripture. They were deeply religious men. They understood the law and knew that God was caring for their nation, and they did desire to understand and be near him. And you have this new religious teacher coming along, and he's saying, no, I'm bypassing all of you. I'm not going to invite you in to be my closest circle. Right? Even if you think, well, there's some flaws there. Of course, they're big flaws. But who better than Jesus to teach and correct? And he said, no, I am not going to bring you into my inner circle to teach and correct. I'm going to look at these people who you view as the lowest. And so the Pharisees finally get to the point, right, seeing all this, and they asked his disciples, and they said, why is he eating with these people? And Jesus' response is beautiful. Remember, I said this is going to be a picture of why it's so beautiful for you and me today. And Jesus said, it is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. I did not come to call the righteous, but the sinner. Okay, so there's a really big piece here again where this passage is very familiar, but sometimes we still in our humanness get it a little bit mixed up. Sometimes we look at God's kingdom and say it's upside down, right? And we say he came and turned everything upside down. And if you look at the contrast of Matthew and the Pharisees and the tax collectors, you could reasonably come to that point. But we have to remember that it wasn't that the world that Jesus entered in was not the original plan. It was not the created world. It was the fallen world. And so Jesus didn't come to turn everything upside down. Jesus came to put everything right side up again. We had managed to turn everything upside down and inside out. And Jesus was coming to put it back together. And what Jesus was saying here to these to this group of Pharisees that he was with was that you cannot come to me if you believe that you are already right side up. Right? These Pharisees believed that they were already oriented the way that they should be oriented. We see that's not the case. There's a beautiful quote, and I struggled to find an accurate source. Jonathan Edwards was suggested. There were some other preachers. But the quote, nonetheless, illustrates the point really beautifully. It's, "You contribute nothing to your salvation except sin that made it necessary." And so in Jesus' answer to the Pharisees, he is pointing this out. Right? He is saying that these men recognize that they are sinners and broken and in need of a Savior. And that is the primary qualification for following Jesus. You cannot follow Jesus if you think you are already well, if you think that you have righteousness, if you think that your life and your heart are already oriented in the proper place, when we clearly see that they are not. And that's why it's a beautiful picture for you and me, because we often get into a place where we start to think, oh, I have to have my life together in order for Jesus to do more with me here. You know, I've been a Christian for a long time, and I'm still struggling in this area, or, you know, I have battles that I just don't like in my life. I have corners of my heart that are stubborn and broken. And the picture isn't that we have to figure it out and fix it. The picture is that we bring that to Jesus. Say, I need your salvation. I need your correction. And you offer it because of your goodness and mercy. And, you know, I asked, it's a beautiful picture, and his Pharisees are gonna question him more because they still don't understand, and this is gonna get under their skin. This passage really does hang together, but it hangs loosely, as a lot of Mark does, because there's a lot of just really fast pace. And so we continue, but these really are connected. So as he's answering these questions, right, they say, okay, this is why you're not eating and drinking with us. This is why you're eating and drinking with this group of people. But then they follow it up with another question of, why aren't you fasting? Why don't your disciples fast? And the response here, if we don't understand the context, we're actually going to miss something really important. There is a claim to divinity in Jesus' answer. I had Mike open up with the passage from Isaiah. And that passage, along with many others in the Old Testament, is a parallel that the scriptures draw that God himself is the bridegroom of Israel, and Israel is his bride. And the New Testament makes it very clear that the church, right, is the bride of Christ. And so in this context, in this understanding, when Jesus responds, while the bridegroom is with them, the attendants cannot fast, can they? They would have understood that as, again, a claim to divinity, which is pretty powerful. So again, you can imagine in this scenario, and the temperature just rising, right? You see these Pharisees coming to the understanding that Jesus is going to associate and bring in, not only just associate, but bring into his inner circle these low-class people. And then he's going to stand there and claim to be God himself. in a powerful metaphor that is beautiful. Another painful yet helpful example to help us see this claim for divinity is the book of Hosea. The entire book is a metaphor. God tells Hosea to go marry a wife of harlotry and have children of harlotry, which seems like a very strange request, right? That God, University cares very much about sexual purity, to tell his prophet to go marry somebody in this line of work. But he says, this is what it's like to be the God of Israel. I am your bridegroom, and this is what you do to me. All the time. So again, knowing the scriptures, these men knowing the scriptures and studying all of these things would have clearly understood that Jesus was here claiming to be God. And so then how does this, what does the rest of his answer have to do with this question, right? Why don't you fast? Well, I am the bridegroom. Then we get into this, kind of strange passage that seems to be just kind of stuck in here about the old cloth and the patch and the old wine and the new wineskins. And there's some argument about, or not argument, there's some different viewpoints about what exactly Jesus is talking about. Some say that he's rejecting this idea of fasting, but he's clearly not doing that, because he says when the bridegroom is with, the attendants cannot fast, but when he leaves, they will. This is a very clear call to, again, custom. So the rabbinical rules on Monday, I think it was Monday and Thursday, were feast days, or fast days, excuse me. You were expected to fast, except for during a wedding feast. You were actually not allowed, if there was a wedding happening that fell on a Thursday, on a traditional fast day, there were additional rules that said actually it's worse to fast when you're supposed to be feasting than it is to just fast. And Jesus says, when these festivities are over, when he is going to be taken away, he's going to leave, my disciples will fast in that season. And so what is he saying here? Well, Christ is making it clear that he is the fulfillment. Okay, so he is, again, through his claim to divinity, he is the fulfillment of the promised Messiah. He is the Son of God who has come to fulfill all the prophecy. He is the bridegroom that God claims, or that God set up in the Old Testament. He is the bridegroom, and he is making it very clear that as you follow Jesus, there is no room for the old. You don't get to follow Jesus and hang on to just this old piece of you that you really like or is really difficult to let go, because that tears the cloth apart or bursts the wineskin, and you lose everything of value. So this is, again, a really beautiful passage, summing up really a whole gospel message just in a few stories that seem to be crammed together. But we see, again, through Matthew and the disciple and the tax collectors, the lost and broken state of man. But then we see this great hope, Jesus, that is coming and willing to call us. But we see the great cost, that we must totally yield everything to the Lord. And you cannot serve two masters. We see that in a couple of places. We see that in the parables. We see that in Jesus' call of Levi himself, right? He doesn't get to be a tax collector 2 days a week. He has to leave the old and come to the new. And the most beautiful piece of this passage is that it's all available to each and every one of us, even today. Thank you. Would you pray for me? Heavenly Father, I thank you so much for your word. I thank you so much for your grace and your patience and your mercy that is so evident to us, even in what feels like a breakneck pace of the gospel that sometimes seem thrown together. It is so clear that you are speaking to us through all of it, and you are painting this beautiful, beautiful message that we, your broken creation, can come to you and find forgiveness and rest. Thank you.